it's nice to see a couple familiar names. When I was in the private sector, I think Ken was one of my adversaries for like one of our pursuits, and Rachel. Back in the day, Rachel and I worked together at NOAA. So, and Sean, thanks for the invite. As someone I've known for quite some time, both of us like very literally growing up in our careers and seeing where things go. It's nice to stay connected. Um, so I shared a YouTube link. I was the odd person that just randomly, with no description, dropped a YouTube link into the chat. It's actually from an individual who leads whatever the German. It's like it's a German telecom group. It's essentially T-Mobile in Europe, and they talked about. Lately, I've been doing a lot of research on partnerships, like the actual the psychological, the business perspectives, processes, how the broad scale implementation of it. And one of the things I really dove into, like, Harvard Business Review, and you get into, like, when you think of partnerships, there's a huge business perspective of this idea of signing on as being invested equally, or for percentages, almost monetarily, with someone else. And I came across that video. It's a 30-minute video. I'll tell you, it's kind of long for a YouTube video, but I highly recommend it. It's very kind of TED Talk. Sit down. And it talked about how their company was transitioning away from a mergers and acquisitions type of business model. And so what's interesting is my background. I am a coastal ecologist by training. I'm a technical, like, my background is technical. I do a lot of communications now. So when I was getting into this, and I was reading things that said M&A, 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 and I'm like, what does M&A mean? And it was mergers and acquisitions. And so they talked about how mergers and acquisitions is no longer part of their business model, and how they are transitioning to this partner first mentality. And this idea of partnering first has really helped their business blossom, and simplifying that partnership process, alleviating and moving away from some of those really administrative challenges that come with it. Simplifying partnerships agreements and things like that has really allowed them to move in a very different direction. And so this mutual value proposition aspect really was enlightening. So I wanted to just share that. And then I have a little presentation I wanted to get into. I know when I was first speaking with Sean about what are some of where we've seen a lot of success, where have we had some challenges, and where do we hope to go. And so I'll share my screen now. Thank you. And so I just want to just talk a little bit about, like, really kind of building our network. So the RNPN. So who are we? We were found. Oh, let me turn this down. Yeah, we were founded in 2015, and so the RNPN is fairly young from the perspective of networks. And it started in we had our first annual forum. It was at the National Building Museum about 5 years ago now, and it was about 40 people, and we might have had double-digit number of organizations represented. And it was pretty heavily probably FEMA tangential focused, and that was really our start. It was I wasn't even part of it. I think Ashley, I think I can count on one hand people that have been to all 5 of our forums. One of them is Doug Hildebrand with the National Weather Service, and so we really have this story that we tell about how the network has kind of grown up and where we came from, and our hope is really just to try and advance resilience collectively, right? This idea that there are strength in numbers, that no one organization can do that alone, and it's opt-in, and we really just want to foster that collaboration. And so what is our mission? It's to inform, educate, and motivate communities to protect themselves from the loss of life, property, and prosperity as a result of natural hazards. The RNPN is technically managed by FEMA, but you And for those of you that have participated in any of our events, we try to be as FEMA light-handed as possible. Even though we do manage it and we have a team of providers and the fantastic people that, Ashley, Terrence, and then introduced themselves earlier to support that, we do our best to make all of our partners remaining on equal footing. So just because we as FEMA manage this network doesn't mean that we make all the decisions unilaterally or try to go in a direction that is only in perfect alignment with what our mission areas are. And so we have a little bit more flexibility. We use the network. It's a great tool to really push a little bit of our boundaries, push outside of our traditional mission space, and really push outside of our sort of preaching to the choir. How do we bring in new voices or new organizations that may never have interacted with FEMA before? And so who are our partners? To date, we have well over 200 organizations that are involved in the RNPN. We're always looking for new and diverse organizations to join our network. I'll talk about the forum in just a minute. But one of the things I think we really learned over the last 6 months is that there's no such thing as a resilient sector. I think we used to describe the network as a group of diverse organizations across across all sectors of resilience. And that's kind of a lie at this point. Our push has been to focus on organizations that may not see resilience as part of their mission area, why that is, and how we can make resilience relate to their mission. I told a story I like to tell is Jake White. He works for the National Association of Latino Community Asset Builders. He was one of our presenters at our forum. And when we first spoke to him, he had some reservations, some hesitation about being a presenter. He said, hazard mitigation resilience isn't really something I'm familiar with or that our organization does. And we had to explain that we can bring resilience representation or hazard mitigation experts to the table. What we needed was someone that was an expert on engaging Latino communities. And once we got to that point, and Jake started having these conversations internally preparing for our forum, he realized that, their office in Miami was dealing with, climate gentrification, that Latino communities, that he had colleagues working in Miami on climate gentrification, how Latino communities that are generally, lower socioeconomic, that sit on the high ground. Well, that area is now becoming prime real estate in Miami, as I'm sure preaching to the choir, many of all of us are aware. And so it became something where he said, oh, this is a priority for our stakeholders. And I think that's where we're going to see the greatest amount of change, rather than, really focusing on a lot of the more traditional organizations we've always interacted with. And so how do we do that? We have a Resilient Nation Roundup, which is our newsletter that goes out once a month. We've seen a really big explosion in interest in the newsletter. It's so much so, in fact, that we've had to cut down the amount of words people use for their submission because it's becoming too long, and it's going through a redesign. But it's really fantastic. It goes out to a distribution list of approximately, I think, 1,400 people now. We have Resilience Exchange, what we call the Resilience Exchange, which are really kind of ad hoc webinars or in-person. We initiated this pre-pandemic. But our hope was really to mobilize these partnership events around Washington, D.C. We focus primarily at headquarters level, and then we wanted to kind of try to pilot it with one of our regions. But there's so many organizations that are available and are present in Washington, D.C. How do we sort of move around the city and bring people and expose them to these new ideas or topic areas? And so that is something sort of post-pandemic we'd like to literally mobilize around the city, moving from sort of different offices or headquarters and things like that. We have ad hoc partnering events. So something that we had a lot of success with last year was the National Building Museum holds what they call the Big Build Community Day. And they have literally thousands thousands of people. It's focused on children, actually. They get together and they just open up the museum and people move through all day. And we actually use that as an opportunity to partner internally with FEMA across, outside of our traditional directorate. And we had a stream table, as you can see. So John and Gargiola right there on the right, just the ball of energy guy, hung out with the kids all day. And they were there's different tiers and elevations within that stream table. And kids got to build, place homes and vehicles. And then we flooded it. And it was a huge hit. We also had our virtual reality, our immersed virtual reality for some older kids where they could go through and experience some different scenarios for flooding. And then we also have our annual forum. Also, we have quarterly calls, which is a little bit more of it's a slightly bigger effort than the Resilience Exchange. We do them once a quarter. They're almost always focused on a huge priority at the time for our stakeholders. So recently, obviously, COVID has placed a huge impact on budgetary shortfalls, and we always know that state and local government, there's always capacity constraints. And so what we wanted to do is discuss how COVID has exacerbated that, which it clearly has, but how we wanted to start getting to a point where we can dig into our network resources to help some of these states and localities or organizations overcome that capacity. So that's where we're driving to next, is how do we now leverage our network expertise to provide, to overcome some of those gaps. And so State Representative Greg Takayama joined us from Hawaii, thanks to the National Council for State Legislatures. And we also had the National Governors Association on. So we were starting at the state level. I think we'd like to continue with this topic and move to a more local level to have the discussion. But to hear Representative Takayama talk about, the state of Hawaii has approximately a $9 billion annual budget, which is quite small. It's very heavily dependent on tourism. And for him to say that they have a 25% budgetary shortfall, so well over $2 billion, was really difficult, especially when we're trying to ask states and localities to take risk reduction activities. And so how are we sensitive to that? How can we leverage our network to help people like Representative Takayama have that shared responsibility and that provide more value? And then we had our annual forum. So I for those of you that were able to attend, I know a couple of you were. This is a yearly event that we have. It was well over a year ago that we spoke to NOAA about being our co-host. We co-host this every year with another organization. So the first one I mentioned was the National Building Museum. The second one was American Institute of Architects. The following year, Pew Charitable Trust's Flood Prepared Communities hosted at their site, the World Bank the following year, and this was our 5th year. And it was delayed, it was postponed due to COVID. And what we did was we had transitioned to a virtual summit. So we had over 2,200 people attend over the course of 4 days. We had over 1,300 people register, representing more than 500 organizations. And our topic, and this is something interesting, well over a year ago, we agreed with NOAA that equity was going to be our topic. And we could have never, ever imagined the current events would have moved and elevated that priority as it did. And it really, there were a number of things that acted as a hurdle, that were hindrances, or that essentially kind of handcuffed us a little bit. And what this ended up doing was allowing us to really push outside a comfort zone. This was a very, very difficult conversation. It was, all managed by a federal agency. You can imagine how difficult, as of late, this type of event was. And we had very serious conversations about not censoring and trusting our speakers to be a part of that conversation. And I think it exceeded all of the expectations we ever could have imagined. And we really want to use this as like a launching point to really start more co-development and building a mutual collaboration across our network. And so we're starting. We're actually just after this meeting. We have a 2 hour open session with our speakers to talk about what a post-event resource looks like. That really is meant to kind of unify language across those, I think, 28 organizations that were represented as speakers, and really provide value to the network and beyond. And so I'm going to stop there because I really want to prioritize, you know, discussion with everyone. Um, Please, any of you that have any questions or anything, you are more than welcome to email me. If you would like more info, or you would like to be put on our distribution list for the newsletter or our upcoming events, you can email FEMA-resilientnation@fema.dhs.gov, and we will add you. And then we also have a website that links, and it's actually not even the right link. It should say resilient-nation-partnership-network. So I'll have, if Ashley or Tiara or Sam could drop that in to the chat, that would be great. And then I'll just say thanks. And so I think some of you may know Hank Hottie, but this is a fantastic quote that he gave us about how he felt about the network, and he continues to be a fantastic partner of ours, doing some great work now down in Pinellas County as their first ever sustainability and resiliency coordinator there. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and please, I'd love to hear some questions about what y'all are interested in learning, or what we can provide our insights and experience. And that's why I wanted our team to join. So I'm sure there's going to be a diversity in some responses to your questions. So Ashley, Tara, and Sam, please feel free to speak up, and I'll stop there.